So you're thinking about buying your first home in Washington, D.C., and you're probably thinking, is there any down payment assistance programs that you can take advantage of to make home ownership more attainable and achievable? Well, today we're going to be talking about a specific program that gives you between $70,000 to $202,000 to buy your first home. And we're going to get after it right now. So today we're going to be talking about a program called HPAP, which stands for Home Purchase Assistance Program. And before we even get started, let's talk about why would someone, a DC resident, want to take advantage of this HPAP program? Like, why? So here's why. As you probably already know, or if you don't know, we have a huge housing affordability crisis, not only in DC, but in the whole country at large. But we're in DC, so we're going to be focusing on Washington, DC. We have a housing affordability crisis. The average home price in DC right now is around $620,000. That's drastically, significantly above the national average, which is $400,000. So what does that do? It makes homeownership very difficult for a lot of first-time home buyers who don't make a whole lot of money. But hey, in DC, we're quite lucky that we can take advantage of this HPAP program, which is the largest down payment assistance program in the entire country. So let's get right into it. Let's talk about the amount of funds that you can actually receive from this HPAP program. You can get anywhere from $70,000 all the way up to $202,000. And let's take a look at this chart right here. So as you can see on the left, the far left, it says maximum assistance, and over here on the right it says household size. All this means is if you were a one-person household size and you made $53,000 or under, you would qualify for the entire $202,000. If you were a one-person household making between under $68,000, you would qualify for $161,600. If you were a one-person household making under $73,000, you would qualify for $141,000 in assistance. You can apply the same principles if you were a two-person household, three-person household, all the way up to an eight-person household. They qualify you based on your income and your household size. Let's talk about the other things that you need to qualify for this loan. The first thing is a 600 credit score. Now, it says 620 here, but I usually advise people, because HPAP only requires a 600, but I usually advise people to have at least a 620. And that's just because when you go and apply to get a mortgage from the actual mortgage lender, they're going to want to see that you have a 620 credit score, even though HPAP requires a 600. Because remember, all HPAP is a down payment assistance loan. You still have to go out and get a mortgage. If you didn't want to take 2, 3, 4 years to save up $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 to use as a down payment, to use as your down payment, this is where this comes in handy, is they just give you the money up front for your down payment. So it's a down payment assistance loan, not a grant, because a lot of people tend to use those two words interchangeably. A loan is something that you pay back, and a grant is something that's forgivable. Let's talk about item number 2. Item number 2 is they want to see that you have a no more than 45% debt to income ratio. Now, what does that mean? This means that, let's use real numbers just so you can visualize this. If you made $5,000 a month gross, they don't want to see you paying more than $2,250 a month towards your debts, right? So $2,250 a month would fall right around that 40 to 45% of your total monthly gross income. This is your total monthly payments on your debt, not your total debt, right? So car loans, student loans, personal loans, credit card debt, all those monthly payments cannot exceed 40 to 45% of your monthly gross income. Because, hey, listen, they don't want you to they want you to be comfortable when you're paying your mortgage, right? They don't want you to be in a situation where you're thinking, should I pay my mortgage or should I put food in the refrigerator? Not a good position to be in, and they don't want to see you in that position. And neither do I, and neither should you. Let's talk about some other few requirements. Number 1 is you have to be the head of the household and a first-time home buyer. Now, who is a first-time home buyer in the eyes of HPAP? Well, a first-time home buyer in their eyes is Someone who hasn't owned a home in the past 3 years. So if you bought a home 5 years ago or 10 years ago, doesn't matter as long as you haven't owned a home in the past 3 years. Now, also, you can't have any interest in any residential real estate in the past 3 years. So if grandma or grandpa or mom or your daddy puts you on the deed for their home, unfortunately, you would not be able to qualify for HPAP. Your name would have to come off that deed unless you wouldn't be able to qualify, because they still look at that as home ownership. Even though you didn't purchase the home from your grandparents or your parents and you're inheriting the home from them, you wouldn't be able to qualify for the loan because that counts as interest in residential real estate. Hope that makes sense. Some other things are you have to be a very low to moderate income resident, and the home must be your primary residence. What does that mean? You have to live in the home. Now, a lot of people ask, can I rent the home out? And the answer is yes, you can rent the home out. So if you bought a row home and it had a separate basement, that's a separate unit, you can rent that basement out and live at the top, or vice versa. However, you have to be on the premises. So you can't rent out the top and the bottom and leave, right? And turn it into a complete rental property. They don't allow that. So the only asset types they allow for under HPAP for you to buy is single family homes and condos and row houses, of course. So you can't buy any multifamily buildings, any 3-unit buildings or 4-unit buildings. This is only for single family homes, row homes, condos, and co-ops. Let's talk about something called the applicant contribution. Now, this is what HPAP calls, well, to put that in simpler terms, let me just call it this. This basically means skin in the game. HPAP wants you to have, as a home buyer, skin in the game if they're going to give you money. That contribution is either $500 or half your savings above $3,000. Let me explain. If you had $10,000 liquid in the bank, cash, HPAP would require you to contribute 50% of that, which is half, towards the program. Or if you had less than $3,000 in the bank, they only require you to contribute $500. This is basically just skin in the game, saying if we're gonna give you $202,000 and for a down payment on your home and you have $10K sitting in the bank, well, we want you to contribute $5,000. It's basically exchanging $5,000 for $200,000, $100,000, $80,000. Whatever that amount comes up to. And if you ask me, I think it's quite a fair trade, because if you were to buy a home without the HPAP assistance, you're probably going to be coming out of pocket way more than $5,000. I can assure you that, especially in DC. However, this contribution requirement can be waived if you're elderly, displaced, disabled, or if you can prove some kind of financial hardship. They'll waive this contribution requirement. Let's talk about the loan terms and loan repayments. When is the loan due? The loan is only due in 3 cases. If you sold the home, now let's talk about that for a second. If you sold your home, would you have to write HPAP a check? And the answer is no. They get their money back from the sale of your home. If you bought your home for $300,000, and well, not 3, that's tough in DC, unless you're buying a condo, but let's just use $600,000. If you bought a home in DC for $600,000 and you sold that home 10 years later for $800,000, there's a $200,000 difference, right? All they're gonna do is they're gonna take their money out of that $200,000, and whatever is left back, you keep. That's for yours to keep. That's the equity you've gained. That's how they get the money back if you sold the home. The first instance, if you sold the home, you pay the loan back. If you refinance the home, you pay the loan back. Or if the home ceased to be your primary residence, you would have to pay the loan back as well. Now, let's talk about the refinance aspect. We have 2 types of refinancing. We have what's called a cash out refinance, and we have what's called a interest rate refinance. If you bought the home at a 5% interest rate, at a 7% interest rate, and a year and a half later, interest rates came down to 5, you can refinance to that 5% interest rate to make your monthly mortgage payments lower. That's permissible under HPAP guidelines. What's not permissible is the second type of refinance, which is called a cash out refinance. Well, it's permissible, but if you did it, you would have to pay the money back. Cash out refinance is basically borrowing against the equity of your home. If you have a $500,000 loan balance and your home is worth $600,000, the difference in that is $100,000. So you have $100K in equity in your home. You can actually borrow against that. You can take some of that money out as a loan and use it for whatever purposes you want to. If you wanted to make home improvements or whatever, if you wanted to buy a boat, I wouldn't advise that, but whatever you wanted to do. If you did that, you would have to pay the loan back. Again, it's permissible. However, you would have to pay the loan back if you did that. This is a 0% interest loan that's amortized over 40 years. So this loan, for the entire 40-year period that you have this down payment assistance loan, it's awesome that you're not going to be paying any interest on it. The loan just sits there and you start making payments in year 6. So you have 0 payments in the first 5 years. You're not paying anything on that down payment assistance loan. The only thing you're going to be responsible for is paying the mortgage, but not the down payment assistance loan. You start making payments on the down payment loan in year 6, and it's principal only payments. So let's take a look at what those payments might look like when you start making payments in year 6. Let's assume you got the entire $200,000, right? How you're going to figure out what your payment is going to be is this. You're going to take $200,000 and you're going to divide that by 40 years in months. So you're going to divide that by 480, because 480, that's 480 months. That's the equivalent of 40 years. And that comes to $420. In year 6, you can expect to start paying $420 additional to your mortgage. And you can see that's quite low because there's no interest attached to it at all. So whatever amount of money you get, if it's 80, 100,000, 140,000, you just take that number, divide it by 480, and then you get your monthly payment in year 6. And one last thing to mention is for very low and low income households, the entire loan has 0 monthly payments for the entire 40 years. Now let's talk about one rule they have. It's called the 28% rule. Now, this 28% rule, all this means is HPAP does not want your monthly payment to be less than 28% of your gross monthly income. So if you made $5,000 a month gross, they don't want your payment to be less than $1,400, because $1,400 is 28% of $5,000. And why? Because this often happens. What you see is a lot of times you might qualify for the maximum amount, which is $200,000, but that's such a huge down payment that when you go to, let's say you're buying a home for $300,000, right? And you get $200,000. Well, if you put $200,000 down on a $300,000 home, right? You only have a $100,000 mortgage, and your monthly payments on a $100,000 mortgage is going to be next to nothing. So they're thinking if you're making $5,000 a month, you can afford to pay at least 28% of $5,000. And I can tell you this, $100,000. If you have a $100,000 mortgage, the payments is not going to be $1,400. It's probably going to be way less than that. So in that instance, what they do is they reduce the amount of down payment funds that they give you, just so your payments can be at least 28%, right? Because they're doing that because they don't want to give you that much money where your payments are next to nothing, and then there's no money to go around, because this program, it's a program that's in very high demand, and it's not common for them to run out of money as the end of the year approaches. So they want to spread that money around to as many residents as possible, and they don't want people out here paying $50 on their mortgage if they can afford to pay $1,400. So that's what the 28% rule is. I hope that makes sense. Let me just go over that one more time. They don't want your payments to be less than 28% of your $5,000 a month gross salary or gross income if you can afford to pay more. So I hope that information was easily digestible and helpful. If you wanted to learn more about how to get the process started, feel free to contact me. My contact information is below, pinned in the comments. And if you also wanted to learn more about the different programs that DC has, now HPAP, they offer the most money, but they do also have different programs that you can combine with HPAP to, get as much down payment funds as possible to make that monthly mortgage payment as affordable as possible. If you want to learn about how to get the process started and information on the other programs that's available to government workers and essential workers, feel free to contact me. Contact details are below in the comments. Until next time.